I think the place to start this week is probably Juventus, because there's been two things that have happened in the last week with Juventus that I think are the big news. One is the Supercoppa, which is, of course, not just a Juventus story, it's also an Inter story. But the other one is at the weekend, Paulo Dybala scoring his goal against Udinese, and then the thing everyone's talking about in the Italian papers, certainly front page news for several of them, making a very pointed look up towards the stands, towards where it seems like the director said. He said he was just looking for a friend, Mina. He wasn't looking at the directors. He wasn't making a point about his contract. Do you believe him?
Well, Max Allegri doesn't believe it. When Allegri was asked about it, did you see? I know that was so funny from Allegri. He's such a little. He's so my father. Yeah, my dad would be like, there's no one there. Come on, You're trying to make a point. Okay. Look, I think that he panicked because he did something, and then there's a part of him that doesn't want to get, told off and said that like he's got a bad attitude, and he obviously had to think about it because what he did on the pitch came naturally to him. That was his reaction, like, sort of like the middle finger, and then afterwards he probably just thought, oh wait, I don't want to step too far, so let me just rein it back in and say I invited a friend, that I've never invited before and who doesn't deserve to see the usual masked celebrations that I do. But on this occasion, I was looking for him rather than...
And I just like to look mad towards my friends. I just like to look really mad at them.
Glare at them for showing up and supporting me. So I don't. But listen, we've had conversations on this podcast in particular as well. Do you remember when we first started talking about contract negotiations and about possibly Dybala getting something like 10 million? And we did say, I don't know, I definitely said, let's call his bluff. There's a part of me that doesn't think he wants to leave. I think 10 million is an excessive amount of money to pay considering the financial situation in Serie A. Not just for Juventus, but really every club right now. You can see from the January transfer market how difficult it is for any of these clubs to try to reinforce their squads, because everyone's looking for a loan deal with a potential to buy and no obligation. So 10 million for a player that hasn't played with too much consistency. Is he a great talent? He absolutely is a great talent. Is he the guy making the difference right now for Juventus? He is the guy making the difference for Juventus at the moment. But we know with Dybala that it's been difficult for him to build momentum, to build consistency, to really prove himself as the undoubted leader. If I was his mother and I was advising him, I'd tell him, try something new. As a Juventus fan, obviously I don't want to lose talent, but I think to myself, like Arriva Bene, there's a part of me that's grown to like him a lot because he's a proper businessman. And proper businessmen don't have any romanticism and certainly don't love football in the way that others do. And there is a part of me that comes from a corporate world. Obviously, I've grown up in a completely banking atmosphere. My partner runs mergers and acquisitions for Goldman Sachs. My dad is a banker. My sister's a banker. My whole world was. You
used to work in that world, didn't you, Mina? I don't know if you heard about you, but that used to be your line of work for a while.
Absolutely, I was a trader. So for me, I understand corporate, I'm somebody who totally gets Zlatan moving from one club to another to find his happiness. I don't see it as being a diss or anything like that. I'm very much about the bottom line. I don't have any, let's keep Del Piero because he's our captain. No, he's all that's good. I'm one of those types of cutthroat people. And at the end of the day, we're talking about a player who is turning 29. So if we give him 10 million, let's say the contract is 4 years? Well, it's a lot of money until he's 33 years old, and I don't potentially think that he's going to leave. I don't think there's other clubs out there that maybe there are, but maybe he doesn't want to join them. I think Newcastle will offer a lot of money for him. Does he want to go to Newcastle? He turned down Manchester United. Inter won't be able to offer more than 7 million, which is around what Juventus want to offer. And I think there is a part where you have to be clever about this. I mean, what they agreed on was 8 million plus 2 million in bonuses. But frankly speaking, I don't know. He's good, but that's what Kane's on. I mean, Kane's not off that by a lot. And Kane is, the striker for England. He is a man that Tottenham's always relied on. Of course, he's had his fair share of injuries, but I'm With Dybala, I'm afraid it's too many injuries. I mean, he wasn't part of, the Argentina squad in the Copa America. He barely gets really played often. When you look at the team squad, Lautaro Martinez is the man that they depend on a lot more than they would for Dybala. And yeah, talent is good, but how long are we just going to keep paying this guy a lot of money and not necessarily see the progress? This is the prime. He's 28. We're supposed to be seeing the best football ever. And he does well, don't get me wrong. But when you see Federico Chiesa come on, for example, in the second half, and I don't know, Allegri's going to roll the dice, you get excited. You think a goal's coming, something's going to come. Wow. When he plays for the national team, you can't wait till Chiesa comes on, You just know he's going to ruffle feathers and something's going to happen. When Dybala comes on, do you get that same feeling? Do you think, goals are definitely going to come? No, you expect to see lots of beauty, but I don't know if he brings that same emotion.
Yeah, I think there's so many interesting threads to this, and we've talked about some of these things before in terms of like his reliability, certainly in terms of I'm sorry to say it, but his physical reliability, because he's injured a lot. But just to sort of, I guess, to ground this conversation quickly, like the big talking point that's been sort of discussed a lot in Italy in the last few days is that basically Dybala was told in October that the club was willing to do him this deal, or at least this is the story that's being put out by his side of things, by his agent. The contract was on the table for 8 million euros plus a further 2 million euros worth of bonuses. And that what's happened since then, for 5 years that would have been, since then, Juventus have thought, maybe we don't want to go to that amount. That's obviously, that's his take home, that's his after tax. So it's the cost for the club, you end up putting another substantial chunk onto that in terms of what you're committing to as a club. You're committing to nearly 100 million euros, this one player. Now, I think what's sort of interesting about this, well, there's lots of things interesting, but one thing that I think is interesting that hasn't been talked about perhaps so much, I had a conversation, funnily enough, about this recently with some people about Kingsley Coman and the big contract he got at Bayern Munich. I think when you see these big contract renewals being discussed, you have to remember to think about these from the perspective of what it costs the club to do something else. So you could say, look, re-signing Dybala, say that contract, including all the tax implications, is going to cost Juventus about 100 million euros. It's a lot, and I have a lot of concerns about investing that amount of money in that player. But what you are weighing up against is how much does it cost us to go and get a player of a high enough quality who you also have to pay a transfer fee for, unless you think there's someone who you can get for a free transfer to avoid that transfer fee. And that's where this becomes a bit more of a complicated, I guess, layered conversation, right? Because sure, you would love to go get Dusan Vlahovic and have your number 9 spot tied down. Different players, by the way, of course, but you'd love to go and do that. As Juventus, go and get a striker you really feel excited about for a long time. But for Vlahovic, you're probably spending upwards of 70 million euros just on the transfer fee. And then you've got to pay his wages, his signing on bonus, everything else that comes with it. So the financial side of things is complicated, right? Like there's layers to it. And there is always a benefit. Even if you feel like you're overpaying a player's wages, there's always a benefit on the financial side to keeping what you've got, because you don't have to do that extra bit on top. You don't have to go and do the fees on top. Having said that, I think Juventus are making good economic decisions here. And I think it might be bad form to told the player that you're going to pay him a certain amount in October and to turn around in January and say, actually, we're not willing to do that deal for you. It might not be good for your relationship with that player. It might not be good with your relationship even with agents going forward. But it's better for you as a club than tying yourself to a contract you don't want. And Dybala, he's hugely talented. And I've gone back and forth on this, but I do think he'll find a home, if it's not Juventus, with a competitive club. I don't know that he's worth to Juventus, who aren't Man City with limitless funds or some other club who can go, doesn't matter if it doesn't work out, it's just some money. I don't think it's worth for Juventus right now, with the financial situation they are in, to commit that much money to a player who he's not there all the time. He just isn't. He's injured a lot. And his form in between those periods of injuries, it's up and down. Like he's brilliant when he's brilliant. He's genuinely, when you watch him doing things well, which he's done a few of in the last few weeks. I mean, I think about him and Federico Chiesa combining against Roma, and you think, oh my goodness, here are these two superstar players doing superstar things. But he doesn't do it every game, and he doesn't make it feel like it's going to happen every game. And at that point, with the injuries, do I think you really want to be tied to that contract? I don't know that you do. I don't think you've got any out for that contract if you sign it. I think if you sign that contract with him and he does get injured badly or his form doesn't live up to it, I don't think you're going to be able to sell him. And I think that's the really scary bit of doing that deal. And
I think that's what you put like perfectly well, because people are saying, well, listen, if you consider how much you have to pay if you want to get a Vlahovic or a top level striker, you have to pay a transfer fee on top of the wages that Dybala is looking for, or something, a figure close to that. And then you have to add on, obviously, everything with agent fees and all of that. So it's a lot more than what you just get with Dybala. But here's the thing, is what I may get is double the price. I may be paying that, but I'm probably going to get a lot more availability. Of course, you never know, right? But there's different types of players. You buy Ronaldo and you think to yourself, he's rarely injured. I mean, he's been rarely injured in his career. You look at Zaniolo and you think he's got all the talent in the world, but there's a part of you that worries about his availability, about his ability to overcome all the injuries that he's already sustained at a very young age. And we do have to look at injury records, because Ousmane Dembele, for example, is a beautiful player. He's one of the best to watch. But again, one is terrified to invest this amount of money into a player because you don't know if he's going to be there all the time. And you're looking at 5 years up until the age of 34. So I said to them, are you really comfortable with losing a player for free, considering the talent and the money that Dybala could have brought to Juventus? And the reasoning is they were never going to make money from him, as in to sell him. Because even if, say, they renew and give him the 10 million, because I was very much against Milan not giving Donnarumma that contract at the time. And I thought, you know what, it's worth paying that money, even going into debt almost to pay Donnarumma, because if you can't afford him in a year's time or 2 years' time, and you start thinking his wages are too heavy for your club, there is a market for him. You know you can sell him for 100 million. You know he will go because he will want to face more ambitious targets or do whatever it is. You know that he is still young enough to command a lot of money from the world's biggest clubs, and he's good enough. But with Dybala, let's just say he does sign on, and you realize that it's too draining on your accounts and he's not there enough or he's not doing enough. What are you going to do then? You're still not going to probably be able to sell him, because even if you want to, does he want to? That's the issue with Dybala. He has never shown any desire to really leave Juventus to win different trophies with different clubs, or have new experiences, or try new leagues. He's said no several times to others. There's been clubs that have shown an interest, and there's a part of me which thinks that's why Juventus are calling his bluff, because he is very attached to Turin and very attached to Juventus, and he's almost too
2 years ago. 2 years ago, the club was, in 2019, was really sort of ready to say, bye, off you go to Manchester United. That deal was basically done. And it was Dybala who turned around and said no. That would have brought Lukaku to Juventus, and many different stories in different directions.
So there we go. So then if you do renew him and you think, I don't want to lose him for free, so I'll just renew it and then see if I can sell him, you won't be able to sell him. So either way, Dybala is never going to be sold for a fee. So you have to now make a decision. Do you want to invest 100 million in him, or potentially 200 million in someone else? And right now, when you consider the records and the fact that he's been in his prime now for 2 years, and you haven't really necessarily seen what you need to see. And not only that, it's not that even when he is available, he's a player who needs momentum. He needs various things to go his way for him to show his absolute best. What if the team changes their tactical plan? I don't think he's necessarily a flexible player that does different things for the club, in the sense that, if he's, I don't know, Luka Modric, you'll keep him regardless, right? He's a player that will be versatile, and your midfield will always need him. Dybala is somebody who goes back a lot. He's constantly needing to be satisfied in various things. His partners need to be helped. There's always question marks surrounding his performances. And I think so, even if he is available all the time, he is a player that comes with various issues. He's not always happy. He makes that very clear. These types of things frankly annoy me. So yes, I would rather invest double the amount in a player, take a punt on maybe he won't be available too, but maybe he will. And I'd rather have a Vlahovic that I pay 200 million for than 100 million for Dybala, and for the next 5 years face the same issues that I faced in the last 5 years. There are moments of magic, sure. But at the end of the day, he doesn't give me that feeling that I get when I watch a Vlahovic or when I watch a Chiesa, which is you're definitely going to change the match. I still question his attitude. I still question his mentality. And the very fact that, now he's doing all of these things, show me that you are willing to move to a club and actually win trophies. Show me that desire to go above and beyond, Show me you arguing on the sidelines with various different people and dying for your club. I've never seen that from him. I'm sorry, I haven't. I don't even see him stay on his feet long enough when he's being tackled to be like, I'm dying to get the goal in. So I think he's a very, very talented player, but I need a lot more, and I'm willing to invest a lot more. So from a business point of view, this entirely makes sense to me, because you're going to lose anyway. You're never going to get a transfer fee for him. It's about whether or not you want to pay 10 million going forward for the next 5 years.
Okay, so let me ask you a different question here then, Mina, because I don't want to burst your bubble, and I know you are clinging on to the Vlahovic dream, and I don't blame you, because what a player, what a dream to cling on to.
What a dream.
My opinion, my expectation is that Vlahovic is not going to go to Juventus. I think he's going to go to the Premier League. I think that's going to be how this shakes out, unless I don't know, one of the big La Liga clubs steps in. I think he's going to go to a Premier League club that's playing in the Champions League. That's my expectation. I think it will happen not this January, but in the summer. So take Vlahovic off the table for a second. And now just consider with me a future in which Dybala does go at the end of the season. They can't make this work. They can't find a middle ground on the contract. He goes to the end of the season, and instead of bringing in a Vlahovic, you're bringing in, to pull a name out of the air that's in my mind, a Scamacca, a Berardi, something of that level. How do you feel about it then? Do you have any regrets about Dybala going? Because I think Juventus might have to go through this. I do think Juventus might have to go through this. I think Juventus might have to go through a bit more of the rough road before they get back to the smooth, if I'm being honest. I think they're still picking a lot of very expensive deals that they put themselves into, some of which, the obvious one, Ronaldo, you can argue still back and forth about whether you thought it was worth it. Some of which I think everyone agrees weren't worth it. Ramsey, Rabiot, these deals, like they've set the club in a particular hole, really. It's the big reason I don't think Vlahovic will happen. If it was that, if the offer on the table is not Vlahovic, but it's, a couple of years of tight belts and something on the level of Scamacca coming in to be your number 9 and no Dybala, are you then thinking, hang on a second, give me that deal back on the table for a second?
No, I think that it's better to go back to very old school ways, like when Juventus first started the project under Antonio Conte, and really just go for players that are super cheap and very talented players, and hopefully build them up to be the superstars that they are. And that does mean sometimes going for like a Paul Pogba that was a free, and a Morata that was, cheap as well, free as well, and then build them up to be the superstars that they then went on to become. But you see, here's the thing. I don't feel like in any way, shape or form it makes business sense. On a romantic level, Dybala is you always want your talented players to stay where they are, even if they're unavailable. If I had a bunch of money, then I would buy all the bags and shoes in the world, But at the end of the day, if I have to think cleverly, then I have to say I'm not getting my values worth, and you have to think like a business. And so it's about 100 million that I'm paying. What am I getting in return? Am I getting more than 20 goals a season? Am I getting a guy who makes the team tick? So if my alternatives are, Scamacca and Berardi, then obviously, I am disappointed. I think they're wonderful players, but I don't necessarily want them. Ideally speaking, if I am going to start from scratch and I have neither option, then I would rather say, well, listen, if Mbappe and Haaland might choose Madrid, then I'd like to get Benzema if he's available. If he wants an opportunity and a chance, I'd rather give him 100 million, frankly speaking, even at his age. Yeah. Maybe not, but I'd rather go.
I could almost believe that sort of transfer. I could imagine him wanting a different adventure at the end of his career, and Juventus being the sort of club that would offer that. That's an interesting idea.
Or even if Dries Mertens is not going to be renewed at Napoli, then I'd rather have a year with him until I rebuild my squad and find myself some sort of financial stability and start to once again invest in the right talents. But in that, what I was speaking with actually an agent last Tuesday for dinner, he said there's a huge market now for over 30s because there's a lot of clubs that won't pay a huge contract, Chelsea, Real Madrid, and then there's a huge contract for the young ones. But those in-betweens, your Harry Kanes, your Lukakus, Lukaku, it was just on the cusp, right? I think that he managed to leave at the right time to get a huge contract. But at 28, 29, you think to yourself, do I want to invest 100 million in a transfer, cost of a player for 100 million, pay all these wages when I know that in a few years' time he's going to be over 30 and I don't know, I'd rather invest all that money in an Mbappe and a Haaland and a Vlahovic and a Jude Bellingham and all these youngsters that are coming out. And then you see the older players, your Agueros, obviously not anymore, but, your Luis Suarez and those older ones that still provide so much experience and beauty, but come at a much smaller price tag. And so considering we have a lot of youngsters at Juventus, and Allegri has talked about that, Locatelli's, Pellegrini's, then maybe it is useful to just, invest in the older players until we find financial stability and then one day dream of a Vlahovic again. But I still think we're in it for Vlahovic. I do.